Well, good morning, everybody. Happy holidays, happy new year, all that good stuff. So, as many of you know, I'm actually off to quite a late start today. Had a late night last night, but I figured I'd just throw up a quick live stream, open up the panel. I may change the title of this depending on if anybody joins or not. We have a discussion. I don't know if anybody will join this panel because I'm starting so late today, but I wanted to, I think, take an opportunity to just let everybody know why I'm starting this YouTube channel, what my plans are for it. Um, Thank everybody so far for the support. I think I'm coming up on 100 subscribers already. It has been just over 3 weeks. Well over 7,000 views. Really appreciate the support. People have even been sharing some of the videos and stuff with others. So, that kind of support just means a lot to me. I am trying to build a community of people who are like-minded. And I guess I should explain what like-minded is. So my intention of what I'm doing with this channel, I really want to foster respectful dialogue among people who have disagreements. I've often said, that diversity is a beautiful thing and that we need our disagreements. It's actually a really useful thing to have pushback on our ideas. It causes us to think more critically about the things that we're doing, the things that we're saying. And that's good when people challenge our beliefs and our claims. It's very important. Critical thinking is essential. If everybody is in agreement all the time, science would become stagnant. We would have no diversity in art, culture, politics, right? Anything in life. So we really need pushback. We need people telling us, hey, this is a bad idea. This is unproductive. This is unhealthy, right? So the disagreements are great. Diversity is a wonderful thing. The problem is that people in general seem to have a very difficult time expressing their disagreements with each other without just absolutely crashing out, losing their composure, insulting each other, um, so on and so forth. Just being completely disregarding other ideas, other people, and their ideas without even really considering them. So I'm hoping with this channel that I can promote that, so a solution to that we can open up discussions for people to join any topic, right? No topic should be really off the table. And there are some really divisive things. I had a really good discussion actually last night online. One of the reasons I was running so late today is I was up really late last night talking to a group of people, and the Israel-Palestine issue came up. And it was very interesting to see how that conversation went, because two people had two different ideas about what was going on with that situation, and the conversation got pretty emotional. However, uh, once I realized that it was just getting to be circular and that no, it wasn't being productive anymore, I respectfully asked both people to just take a step back from the situation. Realize that there comes a point when you feel passionately about something that you may have to just agree to disagree, but the focus needs to remain that we're all human beings. We share in this humanity, right? I like to say we're all brothers and sisters, even though I'm not a religious person. I do believe that we are all connected. We share this humanity, this humanness, if you will. And it's imperative that we focus on this. And I was really impressed last night because despite how heated and emotional both those people were about their own perspective views on the Israel-Palestine situation, they were both willing to immediately step back, take a deep breath, acknowledge each other as human beings, and then we moved on to another topic. And they were able to engage with each other after that as if nothing had happened. And I was really, really impressed. And I'd like to see more of that. That's exactly what I'm trying to promote. Um, it's it's not easy when people disagree with us, right? It challenges our ego for one thing, and that is the biggest problem. A lot of times is our ego gets involved. It's important to have a healthy ego. You cannot be altruistic. You cannot just give yourself up completely to other people, even people you love. You have to take care of yourself, right? At some point, you've got to understand the levels of commitment that you have. The first commitment must be to yourself, and then philosophers have talked about degrees of love or degrees of commitment, things of this nature, degrees of sacrifice. I think Aquinas, I recently came across Dr. Derek McAllister was talking about something like that on his channel. And he's right. He's absolutely right. We take care of ourselves first. then generally it goes to your family, right? Then your extended family, your neighbors, but it doesn't have to stop anywhere. Our concern for others needs to be universal, okay? But you have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not in a position to help anybody, frankly. You've got to have fairly good physical health. You definitely need good emotional stability, mental health, things of this nature. If you don't possess these things, you cannot help other people. You're really not in a position to be of much benefit to others. You're a burden to others if you don't have these, right? So we do need to take care of ourselves. Our ego tells us this, right? Our ego is that guide that tells us, "Hey, look, I'm important. My ideas are important. My thoughts, my feelings are important." But we must have a healthy ego, right? We have to be honest. Honesty is so important. I think the two most important traits that we should strive for are honesty and wisdom. Honesty is extremely important. If you cannot be honest with yourself, if you don't have good, what do they call it? Self awareness, okay, then you are likely making some really poor choices in your life. You're likely not in, you're not in good relation with other people. Okay. You must be honest with yourself. You must be willing to accept that you're going to have shortcomings, right? Humility is a really important trait. If you don't have wisdom, you don't have honesty, you'll never be able to have a proper sense of humility. Okay. So you need to really strive for these. In philosophy, one of the key questions that they ask is what ought I do? And I do believe that striving for the virtues is really what you ought to do. I mean, and the other one, another question they ask in philosophy is why am I here? Or what is the purpose of life, right? And I believe the purpose of life is to make the world a better place for being in it. That means making the world a better place for others. And you do that, you actually could make the world a better place for yourself. Somebody told me a story the other day, and it was so well said. And I think I'll share that with you now. It was a really, really a short, just, I don't know, maybe we could get really fancy with it and call it a parable or something. So imagine for a moment that you have in your possession the largest diamond the world has ever seen. Okay. How much value does that diamond have? You would be one of the richest people in the world. The largest diamond that the world's ever seen could be worth millions and millions of dollars, right? Well, now imagine for a moment that all of the people in the world besides yourself suddenly just disappeared. So now it's just you and this big fat ass diamond. Okay. What does that do to the value of that diamond? How does that affect the value of that diamond? If there's no other people on the planet, money, financial value, material wealth literally means nothing. What are you going to do with the value of this diamond? What are you going to do with the money? Money has no purpose. So, what really gave that diamond that purpose or its value, right? If the diamond doesn't hold an intrinsic value, which it cannot, that means the value for that diamond was actually in the existence of other people. So let's think now for a moment. Let's go back and think, what if you are the diamond, right? What value do you have in a world by yourself? And I think that's a really good analogy when we stop to think about it. This thought experiment really is interesting to me personally because it really shows that the value, the true intrinsic value that we have is only realized when there's other people on the planet. There's other people around us, right? That's the value that we bring to the world. And so I think that making the world a better place is the purpose of our existence. I had recently been doing some talks about nihilism. Nihilism is a very interesting philosophical position, right? The idea that there's no ultimate meaning in life. Now, nihilism can cover a lot of things. There's a lot of people with nihilism bring in objective or morality, right? There's no objective moral code. Obviously, I think everybody who knows me and by my screen name Objective Ethics, I'm a moral realist. I do believe in objective morality. I believe there's an objective standard for actually what we can measure to be good. So nihilism for me is something I love to study philosophy, and it's a fascinating thing to look into, but I don't take it too seriously for myself personally. I believe we do have intrinsic value. I believe that through our existence alone, bring value to the world and bring value to other people. I also believe in objective morality. One of the things from the philosophers that I have studied regarding nihilism, Nietzsche, in fact, even before Nietzsche, I can never remember the guy's name. There was I believe, a Russian author. I'll probably never be able to recall his name. He wrote a book. I believe it was in the 1800s, 1850s, maybe, and it was called Fathers and Sons. And he actually, maybe it was 1750s. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, he wrote this book, Fathers and Sons, and he really talked about this nihilism in this book, right? The son felt like there's no purpose in life. And in his book, and this is a fairly famous novel, actually, if you haven't read it, it's pretty well known. And the son actually falls in love. He ends up falling in love. And through this experience of falling in love with somebody, he finds value and meaning in life. And he overcomes this nihilistic feeling, this depression, right? This anxiety of thinking, oh, there's no purpose in life. But once he falls in love, suddenly all that goes away. Nietzsche also had a solution to this nihilism thing. With Nietzsche, nihilism is actually not the end, right? It's really the first step, the beginning. Now with Nietzsche, he obviously was addressing religion, right? And this, when you get rid of your God beliefs, then what meaning do you have in life? Because most theists that I know that I've spoken to about this, they they believe that the value, the purpose that they have on this life is to worship, serve, or get to know some type of a god figure, some kind of deity, right? And then work your way towards some kind of a better afterlife or eternal life or a better reincarnation. There's so many obviously different models depending on what religion you're talking about. Well, with Nietzsche, he said this: when you get rid of this God belief, he says that you start to, and you realize that there's no objective purpose to life, right? You go into nihilism. But how do you overcome this feeling of worthlessness, the feeling that there's no value in life? And in Nietzsche, it was about spiritual growth, okay? And realizing, and I'm just summarizing all this for you, just realizing that the value in life is actually in the experience, in the journey, learning to accept the good times and the bad times, both, right? Oh, Chris is hello, brother. So nice to see you. I was just rambling on here. I will open this panel up. Let me just go through just a real quick, brief monologue here, and then we'll open it up to anybody who wants to talk about anything. Really, I was just giving a quick synopsis of what I'm really doing with this channel, why I decided to start it. Somehow I got caught up into philosophy, which doesn't take much for me to get off onto a tangent. But so, if the purpose of life with Nietzsche is to understand that it's the experience itself, right? That the good times and the bad times actually hold a certain value to us, and how we process that, how we deal with that, how we embrace those things, and we should embrace it equally, right? Don't get too high with the highs or don't get too low with the lows, but rather enjoy the experience of life itself. This brings a value, this inherent value to life, because we know we will experience both good times and bad times. It's right. That's the inevitable side of life. You cannot avoid the pain. I have recently been speaking with some anti-natalists. I don't know, for those of you who don't know this, basically this is a philosophical model that believes that bringing children into the world is immoral because of all the pain and suffering. I personally find that to be, I don't mean to be disrespectful of other people's, beliefs or whatever, but I find that to be rather nonsensical, because you you cannot experience joy if you don't have something to measure it against. And one of the reasons that the concept of heaven from the Abrahamic faith, this eternal paradise, doesn't make any sense to me at all, because if you don't have some kind of suffering at some point in your existence, then you cannot experience joy. You have no basis, nothing to measure your joy against, right? So you need some kind of suffering. And people will say, "Oh, well, you suffer here on earth, so therefore you know what suffering's like. So when you get to heaven, then you know what joy is like." Unfortunately, lots of babies pass away without having a chance to experience suffering, for example, right? There's lots of life forms. What do all dogs go to heaven? I mean, who knows? The degree of suffering that people experience varies greatly. One of the reasons that I find it interesting that I've heard people talk about heaven and hell being right here on earth, that this existence is actually a reflection of heaven and hell as opposed to being some ethereal mystical place up in the clouds that we go to. It's actually, we're experiencing it right here. This is relative to reincarnation and karmic destiny and things of that nature, where we're experiencing our heaven and hell in our existences in life. So without some suffering, without a relative amount of suffering, I would even say the joy can only be relative to the amount of suffering that we've experienced. Put it that way. So we if you stop and think about that for just a moment and how real that is, how true that is, then you have to realize that whatever joy you want to experience in life, you must be willing to accept the opposite amount of suffering, whether you experience it personally or observe it in others. You must empathetically at least observe this, right? Or experience this. Then you cannot really attain a relative amount of joy. It's all related. It's all relational. So if we adopt Nietzsche's concept of experiencing the journey, and this is also talked about in Eastern mythologies and things, Eastern religions and stuff, the journey is very important. So trying to get people together to have these conversations about the meaning in life, what value do they have, what value do other people have, this is what I decided to start this channel for, to just bring this all back to the beginning here. And so far, it's been excellent. We've had some really great conversations. I've had some great guests come on. We've shared a lot of different ideas. Now we've talked quite a bit about religion. I'd like to get into some philosophy and politics as well, ethics. I do talk about ethics quite a bit because that's something that I'm pretty passionate about. I do want to be clear for people, though, whether you believe that morality is objective or subjective, at the end of the day, really doesn't matter. What matters is how we treat people. What matters is what ought we do. So for me, I think, we ought to live a virtuous life. That means attaining the virtue of wisdom, honesty, integrity, humility, courage, right? Fairness, extremely important. And as we continue to work on these virtues, our lives do get better because we're able to understand the benefits of the good times and the bad times, right? We're able to value the freedom from suffering and how we can try to alleviate suffering for other people. With wisdom, we can understand our position and the importance of our existence and how relative it is to the existence of other people. Without other people on the planet, our existence wouldn't have the value, like that story with the diamond, right? We need other people. We need to give value to each other. So with this channel, I'm really hoping to promote that. Another aspect that I want to do with this channel is talk to people about mental health. Mental health is extremely important. Depression is essentially an epidemic that the world suffers. Okay, I know people personally in my life. I have very close relationships with some people who suffer from clinical depression to the degree they have to take prescription medication, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, things of this nature. And depression can be absolutely crippling to people. It affects your mental state, and this can affect your physical state. And there's too much to just cover it in a very quick overview with mental health, but I do want to discuss mental health on this channel. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I'm just a guy who's lived a very full, complete life. I have been from the bottom to the top. I've been around the block so many times the damn wheels have fallen off. And people can learn from my mistakes as well as from the things that I've done well. And I don't mind sharing those openly with people because I've come to embrace the fact that I have made mistakes in my life. I will continue to make mistakes in my life. One of the examples that I do feel I can set for people is that you need to embrace your mistakes, to be honest about them, to apologize to people when you've hurt them, right? To understand when you stood up for something that you value and what you value is based in reality, that you don't owe an apology for believing what's right. Maybe the apology is about the way that we express our thoughts, right? Am I being sensitive to other people's beliefs? So I'm hoping to address some mental health issues to help people, especially with depression. I know one of the things that causes people to be depressed is what I was talking about before with the purpose. They don't see the value that they're bringing to life. They don't see the value that life has intrinsically. Beyond the philosophical side of things, when it comes to value in life, there's a biological reality that's tied to existence. Things that exist want to exist. Even for the nihilist, the existentialist, the antinatalist, right? They're showing that they value their freedom and well-being. They're showing that they value their agency by being here. People can make a choice, and I encourage people to make the right choice and to continue to exist. But at the end of the day, this is a choice that we make actively. Organic organisms want to be alive. They want to survive. They want to thrive because they do. If they didn't, then they wouldn't be here, right? And so we need to remember that if our depression is starting to overwhelm us, we need to remember, hey, I want to be here. I am actively choosing to be here. And since I'm actively choosing to be here, I should actively choose to make this the best possible experience that I can. I believe the healthiest and most efficient way to make this experience of living positive is to make the world a better place for being in it, to strive for community, right? Cooperation is imperative to our species. We're a social animal. We need to work together. In addition to the philosophy of religion and trying to get people to have respectful dialogues and disagreements and the mental health, I also want to take you through a journey on my physical recovery. For many of you who know me, know that I am recovered from a very, very serious illness. I used to be in really good physical shape and my whole life, very athletic. And then I was struck down with an illness I was actually apparently born with and had never had any symptoms. I had no idea. And a couple of years ago, I got really, really sick and I thought I had just eaten some bad food. So I didn't go to the hospital right away because I just figured out maybe it's like some kind of food poisoning or maybe I got a flu or something like that. I didn't know. I just was sick. Oh my God. Well, it turns out it was not an just some kind of a virus or something like that, but it turns out that it was a genetic disorder that I have. It attacks my immune system. And it put me down. I lost almost 70 pounds solid muscle in about 3 weeks, dropped all the way to 110 pounds. I was literally just skin and bones. You could see my skeleton like underneath my skin. There was no muscle, no fat, nothing. It was just skin and bones. It was crazy. I mean, I don't know. Many of you may have seen, if you especially live in a more developed country, at some point advertisements for nonprofit company organizations that say forgive me, send send money or send food to underdeveloped nations, and they'll show pictures of people who are in starving countries, and they look so gaunt, so unhealthy, and that's what I look like. I look like a starving person from like Africa or something like that. It was wild, and I think there were 3 different occasions where I was in the emergency room over that period of about a year and a half, 2 years, where the doctors told me if I didn't get into the emergency room when I did, I probably would be dead. And it's pretty surreal when the doctors are telling you that you're on death's doorstep, and it does cause you to think about a lot of things. What have you done with your life? You know, did you live a good life? Did you do the best job that you could given the circumstances? Well, thanks to modern medicine, and I'm very fortunate. It turns out that one of the world's best surgeons that deals with my particular condition happens to live in the same state, same city that I live in. So I was under the very best care that science and medicine had to offer. I had several surgeries and spent quite a bit of time in recovery. So now finally, I've had my last surgery at the end of, I think that was July, June, July. Yeah, I think the end of July. And they wanted me to just take it easy for, I think, like 6 to 8 weeks. Like literally, I was on an 8 pound weight restriction. I couldn't lift more than 8 pounds, which for those of you who don't know, I've mentioned this before, but 8 pounds is how much a gallon of milk weighs. So tells you how just how little 8 pounds really is. But I made it through that. I behaved. It was tough because once I finally started feeling healthy, the first thing I wanted to do was start exercising again, get back to work, but people were taking good care of me. My wife, my employer, they definitely were not going to let me overdo it. And I appreciate that. It was frustrating because I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't like people doting over me and babying me and all that bullshit or whatever, but it was necessary. I needed to take it one step at a time. I'm finally over that now, and I'm determined to get back into really good shape. Now, I used to work as a certified personal trainer, and I've helped many people, athletes, people who just want to get physically fit, people who want to lose weight, people who are trying to increase flexibility. So I decided to go ahead and track my progress, and in the process also to share free information online with the videos, so you can see if you're interested in exercising, getting stronger, getting back in shape. You can just watch the videos, and it lets you know everything you need to do. And I'll do more comprehensive instructions as I go along, and somewhat instructional stuff to make sure to communicate with you how to do these activities safely, what the most productive exercises are. So the channel's pretty diverse. I got a lot I'm doing with it. That may not be a good thing because I don't really have a brand, quote unquote. The whole reason I started this was just to have great communications with people, because I've met so many great people online through other channels. But everybody on other channels, they're doing whatever they're doing, whatever topics they're focusing on, and it's not always something I want to discuss necessarily. There's other things that we get into that I'd like to talk more about. So I thought, well, fuck it, I'll just go ahead and I'll set up my own channel, and we'll see how it goes. And it's growing very quickly. I'm really surprised. I thought maybe I might get 15 to 25 subscribers total, and I think I'm around 100 subscribers now. And like I said, it's only been not about 3.5 weeks, a little less. So I feel pretty confident that within the 1 month mark, we'll be at 100 subscribers. I'm well over 7,000 views on the videos, that blew me away as well. So that's thanks to everyone here who's supporting this community, supporting this effort. I'm really grateful to you, because the more people that see it, I think that the more people can gain from it. I'm not intending to be a quote unquote YouTuber. I have full-time work. In fact, I'm involved in so many different projects now that I'm healthy. I have my full-time job. Part-time, I work at the gym. I work as a personal trainer. Then I have a consulting gig that I do on the side right now. I know a lot about the restaurant bar business, and I'm helping a guy set up a new bar that's mostly supposed to start next year. And then and then during the summertime, I pick up gigs down at the marina, usually when the weather's nice, and I'll do boat projects. I've got a couple of personal watercraft in the garage that I may or may not sell, So I was putting electric motor on one of my kayaks. So I've got just a bunch of different stuff that I'm involved in. So I don't have time to be a YouTuber. But I do want to do at least one regular live stream every weekend, something I can open up the panel to let everybody join, anybody who wants to talk about whatever issues they think are relevant to them. Hopefully set an example of how we can have disagreements with each other, with one another, in a respectful and productive manner. And that's really the mission. I may do, like, midweek, I might release something like a pre-recorded video or something. I don't know if I'm going to keep that up or not. I just might, because my time is so limited. But I think once a week I can make time to do an open panel. I have been doing them on Saturdays. This is the last Saturday of the year. Starting in January, I'm actually going to be moving this show to Sunday afternoons. I'm going to move it a little bit later in the afternoon, like we are today, because I work so late that getting up early is just, it's such a chore. And I don't want this to be a chore. I want it to be something that I look forward to and that I enjoy doing. Plus, I have a lot of friends who are over in other countries. So this time zone that I'm in, it's actually a little bit better to get a little bit later in the afternoon. But I don't think I have anything else because I wasn't really having a particular topic necessarily. I just wanted to open this up and see if anybody wanted to join. I know I'm running really late today. Let me go ahead and I forgot to post the link. I'm so bad at this. Let me let me post this link and see if anybody wants to how do I do that? This wants to join the conversation because anybody is welcome as always. Oh, I got to hit more buttons. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'll even pin it to the top. Yeah, anybody who wants to join the panel, you're more than welcome if you have any thoughts you'd like to share. There were some people I spoke to last night actually who said they might try to jump in here. I don't know if they want to continue that conversation about the Israel Palestine situation or not. That was pretty interesting to hear different views. People who actually live in the Middle East, so this is a much more relevant situation to them. But and if nobody wants to join in, that's no problem at all. I can fill the air for a little bit here. The the what ought I do? I'd like to hear from people about what they want for the next year coming up in 2026. As far as my plans are professionally, I just basically went through what I'm involved in. I do have a debate coming up with Mark Reed on my views on objective morality. That's going to be a good debate. Mark is going to be a very tough opponent. He's a smart guy, good debater. He has a lot of experience in debate, and he's just very intelligent. He'll come well prepared. In fact, we're going to do that on the Raging Tomato site, and I was talking to Sarah, who runs that channel, last week, and I reminded her that we had this debate coming up, and she says, "Yeah, she remembers." And she said, she's telling me, she says, "I hope you're going to come prepared because Mark is a really, really smart guy. He's going to come prepared and he really knows his stuff." So people who know Mark, know his reputation. He is going to be a difficult opponent. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I do believe that morality is objective. However, this is one of those questions in philosophy that probably won't ever really be answered because there are good arguments to be made from both sides. As I said before, whether a morality is objective or not doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? What matters is how we treat each other. What matters is how we live our lives in communities. And I think what's maybe of equal, if not more importance, is how do we treat people we disagree with? It's very important. It's easy to be nice to people who agree with you, right? The challenge is how do we treat the people who don't agree with us? So hopefully we can encourage and foster healthy disagreements, and just always keeping in mind that we're all human beings at the end of the day. We all share common needs, right? We all got to put food on our plates. We all got to put a coat on our back, a roof over our heads. We want to raise our children the best we can, keep our loved ones healthy. So if we focus on that, and we also focus on keeping in the back of our minds that disagreement is good, that pushback is important, that we want people questioning our ideas. We should be questioning our own ideas, frankly. That's one of the things I think that being a skeptic, it's really beneficial. For those of you who don't know, I'm an agnostic. I'm pretty skeptical about many theological or supernatural claims, but I don't discount them. I don't just hand wave them away. If there's good arguments to be made, I want to hear what they are, and I want to listen openly and honestly and intellectually consider these things, because there are some interesting arguments to be made for a prime mover, as they say. Oh, Robin, it's so nice to see you. Robin, if you feel like jumping on the panel, please feel free. I think I posted the link. I'm pretty sure. I should open up YouTube and look and see what's going on there, because I always forget to do that. I think now, Robin, I hope I'm not going to get myself in trouble here because my memory is so bad, but I feel like you told me at one point that you were wanting to host more debates on your channel. Is that correct? Because if it is, I want to plug your channel for you. I forget who does and who doesn't have channels, who does and doesn't put out content, but I always try to do honorable mentions. Yeah, you are okay. You are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So please, anybody. Oh, let me post this so people can see who I'm talking to. Okay, this is Robin. She's around the community. She's on. She's friends with everybody. She seems like a really nice lady. She's very funny. I've really enjoyed listening to her talk and stuff on other people's shows. Check out her channel if you have a debate and you're looking for a smaller platform, because I know some of the larger platforms are actually tough to get onto if you don't have a reputation. The Raging Tomato site, when I reached out to Mark to ask him where he wanted to have the debate, because he challenged me actually to this debate about morality, and we mentioned a handful of different places. And Mark does not want to do like Modern Day Debate or Standing for Truth, which are two of the somewhat bigger platforms that are willing to host people. And I don't blame Mark at all, especially when it comes to Standing for Truth. I don't mean to be rude to Donnie or whatever, but I've heard him. I've watched a few debates on his channel. He's a young Earth creationist, and he's extremely biased as a moderator. He's also a Trinitarian. A friend of mine, A's Philosophy, who's a Unitarian, had a debate against a Trinitarian on Donnie's channel, and Donnie just let the Trinitarian go over his time without saying anything. And when Ace finally realized, he's like, "How long is this cross examination going to go?" And Donnie's like, "Oh, it expired a few minutes ago, but you guys were doing such a great job, I wasn't going to say anything." And it's just like, and then the guy was basically calling A's a Muslim and saying that people like him are responsible for Charlie Kirk's death. It's just a stupid stuff that shouldn't be said in a debate, frankly, especially given the volatility of that whole situation. And Donnie didn't say anything about it. He didn't reel him in or anything. So I don't blame Mark or anybody else for not wanting to do debates on that channel. and I had seen Mark had done some debates on um, Raging Tomatoes channel. So I asked if he'd want to do that, and he said, yeah, he's fine with that. So I reached out to Sarah, who runs the channel, to see if she would host the debate. And she's a nice lady, but she's basically like, I know Mark Reed, but I don't know who you are. I've never heard of you, which is not surprising. I'm basically nobody on the internet. And so she says, she made me send her video clips or links, whatever you call it, to previous debates that I had done. And then she watched them to decide if I was like, I don't know what she said, capable enough or intelligent enough or whatever, professional enough maybe to do debates on her platform. And I was glad that she approved it. She said, you did a great job at your debate. Yeah, you guys can do it here. But the point of all that is that if you don't have something, if you're not somewhat established or don't have something that you could show that you know what you're doing, you're not going to embarrass the channel owner. Then these larger platforms are hard to get onto as far as doing debates. So I think supporting some of the smaller content creators, it's a benefit to both people. One, you can get a fair moderator for your debate. So that's always great to have. And for the small channel creator, it gives them content for their channel. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. So I definitely check out Robin's channel. I imagine, Robin, I imagine that you have contact information in the description of your channel. People can reach out to you somehow. I'm assuming. I don't know. I know that I put my email address. So if you go to the description of my channel, you can actually reach out to me. You can contact me. And I think most content creators try to do this. Um, but yeah, it is formal debate is the only debate that I do. I mean, I love to have discussions with people. I'm all about that. But as far as debate goes, I'm not going to have a just hash it out with people and call it a debate without a moderator, because if somebody has something they believe passionately enough and they want to get into an actual debate, then we can do it in a structured way so that the arguments can be really fleshed out and that we can do it in an organized way. Also, I like the I don't know what you call it, the not the pressure, but the accountability when it comes to having a moderator. At least you should, if you have a neutral moderator, not somebody like Donnie. But when it comes to like the ad hominem attacks, the name calling and stuff like that, if somebody's going to do that in a formal debate, then they get docked points for it, because these are fallacies, right? If you can't make a good argument without attacking your opponent as opposed to the idea, then you should probably reconsider your own position. You either are not in line with the truth, the objective truth, or you just don't know how to formulate a good argument. If you have to attack people personally about anything, whether you're talking about religion, politics, philosophy, lifestyle choices, whatever it may be, if you have to attack people personally, tear them down, ridicule them, then chances are you really don't know what you're talking about, or you know deep down that your argument isn't very good or your position is misaligned with the truth. And I see this all the time online. I've had exposure to this. I recently had a really great discussion on a channel I like a lot, and I was talking to some people. We're having a nice conversation about ethics, and some crazy vegan guy came on and just started calling me all kinds of names. And I've seen them do this. I've watched that channel a few times, and these two vegan guys, they anybody who doesn't agree with them, anybody who isn't a vegan, they just call them, fuckers and dumbasses and murderers and whatever else. And it's just like, oh my God, you guys, if you can't make an argument for why everybody should be a vegan, all you could do is just attack people, right? Personally, and trying to tear them down emotionally, then you don't have a good argument for veganism. Personally, I don't think veganism is a very logical position, because I believe that our ethics and morals are actually tied to natural laws and have to work within nature ultimately. And I've now, granted, there's different types of vegans out there. I will admit, I've talked to a variety of different vegans, but one of these guys, he was talking about they were talking about global warming. And after telling everybody that they're murderers and they're dumb fucks and stuff for wanting to kill animals, he's like, "Oh, I don't care if the polar bears die. I don't care if we have to cut down a bunch of trees to combat global warming." And I'm like, so you don't care about the environment, you don't care about the food chain. So what is it? The only animals you care about are, what do they call them? The animals with faces or whatever. I've heard vegans say some of the craziest things. Animals with faces. What even? what, what does that even mean? I don't know. But the hypocrisy, because anybody who's on the internet, on a phone, living in a modern house or apartment, drives a car, wears modern clothing, anybody who's basically living in this world is complacent, through complacency alone, reducing natural animal habitats of vegetarian animals. Okay, it's not just the carnivores they're affecting. So you have no ground to stand on at some point to point your finger at other people, right? You are actively harming animals, the very animals that you're claiming to care about, simply by existing in the modern world. Okay, and people draw these arbitrary lines and say, well, we just can't eat them, but it's okay to reduce their habitat. It's okay to buy products that actively harm these animals. It's okay to harm the environment. If we want to cut down trees to build our houses, that's okay. If we want to pollute the air to drive our cars, that's okay. It's just such a strange double standard to me. And if you're a type of vegan who literally does every single thing in your life to actively avoid harming any animal whatsoever, I think, is it Jainism that believes so strongly in nonviolence that the adherents to Jainism will sweep the walkway before they step to make sure they don't kill any bugs. I mean, if you're going to go to that extreme, then I have a lot more respect for you. Absolutely. If you're going to spend your whole life sweeping the bugs out of the way so you don't actually accidentally step on an ant, that's a pretty serious commitment, and I'm all for it. If you're going to do it, then you need to do it. But if you're going to basically live in the modern world and then act like you're some kind of like a righteous person because you choose not to eat meat, that's very, in my opinion, very hypocritical, and it just doesn't carry any water. I do think that, if we are going to be eating meat products or animal products, we should make a concerted effort to only support small farms and organic farms, cage free situations, right? Range free or whatever, or range. I don't even know what it's called now. It's cage free, like the eggs that I buy. Free range. That's what I'm trying to say. Free range and stuff like that. I know farmers personally, places where I get my meat and stuff like that. They take better care of their animals than a lot of people do with their domestic pets. These farm animals are very well cared for. Factory farming is an issue, and it is problematic for the ozone as well, right? It sounds funny to say that cows farting is such a major problem, but it actually is. So there are ethical ways to go about this, in my opinion. But the app just telling people they shouldn't eat meat, to me that doesn't follow. I haven't done anything with it on my channel yet, and it's a lot to get into, and I only have so much time for research. But there is some interesting scientific studies that are being done on consciousness and sentience. And I'm not saying this is true or not because I haven't looked into it enough, but from what I hear, science is actually starting to think that plants are have a certain degree of sentience. In fact, there are some models where even single-celled organisms are considered to have a certain state of consciousness. Okay, I don't think that neuroscience backs that up. I think personally, I think consciousness is emergent. I think that it's pretty clear to me that consciousness is emergent, but it depends on how you define consciousness. If consciousness is simply being aware of your environment, well, then yeah, any single celled organism that reacts within its environment, which is basically how we determine life from non-life, right? It's you're taking in you're taking in energy, right? And you're producing energy. You are reacting to your environment. You're reproducing. Okay, this is the very basics of what makes things living or not. And so, if we're going to reduce consciousness down to something like that, then I think you could make an argument that any organic organism is conscious at that point. But I think for most of us, consciousness actually is a certain state of awareness. And in neuroscience, we know we one of the reasons that I don't I don't believe in idealism, and I think that it's one of the best arguments against idealism. In fact, I was just reading up on Berkeley the other day, and Berkeleyan idealism is very interesting. He was kind of groundbreaking in that concept, although this idealism panpsychism thing, these are more modern terms, but there's ancient religious cultures that taught about these kinds of things. I think we talked a little bit about Jainism, for example. There's Taoism, right? Substance monism, things of this nature. Even if you go all the way back to Neoplatonism, and there's some philosophical models where we talked about everything being connected, this non-dualism type of a thing. But with this, with neuroscience, we know because we can test this, we can predict it, and we can repeat it, that certain levels of consciousness are tied to certain brain activities. And if you remove or cease those brain activities, consciousness is affected directly. And because we can observe this, we can repeat this, right? We can predict it. It tells me that's pretty well evidenced that consciousness is emergent. And without a brain, you don't have consciousness. Now, there is the infamous hard problem of consciousness that we haven't figured out. How does immaterial, I mean, not immaterial, how does material things produce a conscious state? And that is a very interesting conundrum. How do electrochemical signals in the brain, neurons firing, produce conscious thought? It's pretty fascinating. But just because we don't understand how that happens exactly, we can still recognize that one is definitely tied to the other because we can affect them. We can affect the brain and directly affect consciousness. There are other problems when it comes to the philosophical side of things. If consciousness is everything emerges from consciousness, consciousness is fundamental. What existed before the first brain? And this is where these ideologies turn into almost religions of themselves, right? Because like with Berkeley, for example, because of we call this the continuity problem, right? So Berkeley's solution to the continuity problem was God's mind basically kept the world in order, right? Kept the world ordered so that when humans weren't around to observe and make matter exist, it was God's mind that kept things in existence. But without God's mind, nothing would exist, right? It exists within God's mind. The problem is that, well, with Berkeley's model in particular, things were sensory. right? So you feel, you touch, you taste. That's what gives things. That's what makes things real. Well, God doesn't have these senses, and there's a distinction between what we imagine in our minds and what we actually perceive with our minds. So the model kind of falls apart with the continuity problem. Full idealism addresses this by saying that consciousness itself is fundamental, right? Panpsychism and panenpsychism have offered models to this, right? So that you get this fundamental consciousness. But again, with neuroscience, we can affect human consciousness. Split brain patients is another thing that's very interesting when it comes to some of this. But that's really, I think, the split brain patient thing is more relative to ideas about free will and identity than consciousness itself. But neuroplasticity is an interesting thing to study when you're studying the idea of consciousness. So for me, I think it's, I am a naturalist, not a materialist, because I do believe there are transcendental things, um, the qualia, if you will, of things. There's the noumenal, the phenomenal aspect of life, certain feelings that we have, even though we can trace chemical reactions inside the body, right? Like our when we're in love or when we're happy, when we're sad, when we're angry, we can trace these things, but we can't really identify where they actually exist within the mind. We can trace how the effect that they have on the body, but we can't trace the thought itself, the feeling itself, right? What does it feel like to sit by a warm fire? It's more than just the heat of the fire, right? There's something that happens inside of us. The redness of red is another common thing that people use as a talking point for this. So, I do think that there are transcendental things. So I don't put everything into material, but I do think everything is natural, a natural process. I don't think that we need to impose supernatural elements into our existence. Now, I'm agnostic, so I'm open. If somebody could show me evidence for or make an argument for the need of something supernatural, I'm all for it. Whatever. I personally haven't heard a good argument for it yet. I haven't seen the evidence for it yet. And I think that the more we study science, the more difficult it has become for the religious people, for example, or the idealists to logically justify these supernatural positions, these supernatural claims. Life doesn't seem to need a supernatural element, as far as I can tell. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it just doesn't seem to need it. I had a really great discussion last week with Deconverted Man. We were talking about some of the philosophical models that theists pose for the existence of God. And they sound very strong if you don't know a lot about logic, you don't know a lot about philosophy. These arguments can seem very compelling. The watchmaker argument, right? This intelligent design. But if you understand from a designer's perspective, what actually a good design looks like and how it functions, that argument falls apart. The presuppositional arguments, when you understand the logical problems that they inherently hold, the arguments no longer seem that compelling. And I don't know if there's any new arguments to be made at this point. I mean, there are different ways to attack old ideas. We're constantly coming up with new hypotheses for old ideas, but I don't know. It says, in the Bible it says too, but I like to quote the Beatles instead. But there's nothing new under the sun, right? There's nothing new under the sun. So, yeah, I don't know. I do think this next year is going to be a good year. I think it's going to be a great year for the channel. I hope that we can continue to make progress with politics. The political situation in America, where I live, is still pretty volatile. The division between the left and the right. As an independent centrist, I get really frustrated with the political situation in this country. People just are not willing to make compromises to figure out the most ethical way to create laws, to deal with problems that we have, infrastructure. But I am hopeful. I'm actually an optimistic person. I think technology is going to be a big key to our progress. I think science and technology are going to be big keys to our progress. And I know in the medical field, we're making huge advancements. I think the more we start to understand how free will works and the lack of free will, I think the more ethical we'll be able to deal with each other, in particular with justice in the criminal system. Educating people is so much more important than punishing people. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be, quote unquote, punished for their crimes. You have to have justice. Justice is one of the virtues, but we need to be effective. If we want to make positive change in the world, we have to learn what is the most effective way to deal with crime and criminals, and that's figuring out what makes them commit these crimes in the first place. Right. But I think it's part of the bigger picture. When we break it down to the smaller picture, it gets into what I was talking about earlier. And how are we treating each other? What value do we hold? The value that we hold in existence is really making the world a better place, right? And if we could continue to motivate people, move people in this direction, I think a lot of other problems just go away. It was like I did a short on my channel about gun control, and just kind of a crude example, but people are talking, about gun control. Guns are so bad. Guns are, school shootings, mass shootings, all these major problems that are a result of guns, and gun deaths are a big problem. And they are a big problem. They absolutely are a big problem. But getting rid of the guns themselves is not the solution to the problem, believe it or not. The solution to the problem is figuring out a way to get people to stop being so fucking violent. Because if you take away the guns, I mean, people were killing each other, committing genocide, and all these things way before gunpowder was ever even invented, right? They were using swords and axes and spears or whatever the fuck they were using. And before that, they were using rocks and sticks, right? Stone tools to wage war on each other, to murder each other, to bludgeon each other with. So, you got to, the violence is the problem. You get rid of the violence, guns aren't a problem anymore. It just automatically goes away. Huge problem that is absolutely a huge problem right now would literally just disappear, would take care of itself. Right? You got to go to the core of things to try and, if you make these fundamental solutions, then everything else that's tied to it just disappears. It gets fixed automatically. And I think this is how we deal with the justice system. We've got to learn how to educate people more effectively. And we do this as parents, as tutors, right? As guides to children, because even if you don't have children yourself, you still set an example for children around you, whether you like it or not. We set an example for all people, right? People are watching us. How happy are we? How successful are we? How well respected are we? They're observing, they're watching all these things, and our behavior is what's bringing our success. It's bringing our happiness, right? Bringing the respect that others have for us is in our behavior. And while we certainly can't try to please everybody, because that's an impossible task, what we can do is we can hold on to develop a core set of principles, a core set of values that are universal, that we want to be universal. This is one of the problems I have when it comes to politics or religion, is people are pointing their finger. It's so easy for us, and I'm not above it either. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. It's so easy for me to point my finger at my neighbor, point my finger at the person down the street or the person in a different country, and make all these judgments, right? But when I look in the mirror, I'm not so critical. I'm willing to just overlook those same shortcomings when I'm looking in the mirror, right? And we all do this. If we could start to think more universally, right? Like Kant said, right? What did Kant say about this universal principle? Is that we should only behave in ways that we want to become universal. So it's easy with the big stuff, right? So I don't want people stealing, right? I want to be able to trust my neighbors and trust strangers. So the number one thing that I do is I don't steal from other people, right? That's easy. I don't want people to go around murdering each other. So the number one thing I do is I don't murder people, because that's one murderer I'm taking off the books right there, right? I can be responsible and accountable to make sure that there's one less murderer in the world by not murdering people, right? I'm responsible for my own actions. We should look at all of our choices, all of our actions, especially when it comes to how we treat each other, in this same way. If I want this particular behavior to be done to me, if I want to live in this particular environment that I feel safe in, that I can trust people in, where people tell the truth, right? Where people value honesty and integrity, then I need to be an honest person. I need to have personal integrity myself. And if we start teaching people this, we start living by this example, right? I think we can have a positive effect on the world. We can change the world and make it a better place, but we've got to fucking work together to do it. Okay, doing it, one person isn't going to do it, right? But one person can start it. Okay, you can be that change. You can be the catalyst yourself by making better choices, by being more empathetic with the people you disagree with, by being willing to listen to people who have something to say. Somebody once said the other day, and I think it was so true, and I've heard this before, but I'd love to hear it. You should always be willing to listen to people, because you have no way of knowing the very next thing that you hear from a stranger might be the most important thing you hear in your entire life. You never know where good information is going to come from, right? But if we close people off, or we close ourselves off to other people, we are potentially missing out on the most crucial piece of information that could cause such a positive change within ourselves, because we don't trust the source. We don't want to give the source uh, any value or any time. We don't expose ourselves to other ideas, and we are closing ourselves off from potential wonderful opportunities, massive changes that can be made within ourselves. All right, because we're critical or skeptical or closed off. And I do think that it is good to be skeptical, and I do think it's good to be critical, but you have to have a healthy disposition, right? You have to know where does it go from skepticism to cynicism, right? It's so easy to take that extra step and to become cynical. And we don't want that. We want to be working together. We need to be working together. We need to be living by example. Okay. And again, I'm not here to preach at you guys. Okay. I make mistakes all the time. I'm constantly thinking, man, I could have done better. You know, my wife, I was distracted. We were having dinner, and I was thinking about, because I'm so busy, sometimes I let myself lose focus on some of the most important things, which is obviously my relationship with my wife has to be fundamental, right? We talked about the levels of loyalty, the level of care, right? You start with yourself, and then you work out to your friend, to your spouse, your partner, your children, your family, then you extend out to your neighbors, you extend out, and it goes on and on and on. And so here I am with my wife. She should be right at the core, one of the closest things to me, and she's telling me something, and I wasn't paying attention, really paying attention to what she said. She asked, we were talking, I can't remember the exact wording, but she was talking about calling her, checking in on her when she's at work. And my wife has a very stressful job at the hospital. She does a great job. She's a very hard worker, tremendous woman. And I said, I can't, or I said, I kind of made some kind of offhand, because again, I wasn't focused, I wasn't paying attention like I should have been. I got myself into trouble real quick. I said something like, "Oh, I didn't call because I know how your day is at work is going. You're having a bad day because the people, she's in management, and her employees. I hate to say it because they're in the medical field, but the incompetence is staggering. It blows me away sometimes, some of the things she tells me." And I said, basically, I know you're having a bad day. Is what I said, which you would think my dumbass, right, would have thought a little harder before I said something like that. Because if I know she's having a bad day, the fucking, what do you think I should be? I should be calling her, right, checking on her, making sure that I can do what I can to help her have a good day. And she didn't react or whatever. We're just, I just had our dinner or whatever. But the next day, she actually mentioned it to me. She was really upset. Actually, she was crying a little bit about, you really hurt my feelings when you said that, and I wasn't thinking at the time when I said it. And she's absolutely right. That was the dumbest fucking thing I could have said. Absolutely idiotic that I said that. I can't believe I said that. I should have said, "Oh my God, I should call you more often at work, because I know you're having a bad day, and I want to support you. I want to be there for you." Right. And I didn't say that. How easy would that have been? It would have made her day so much better. Instead, I made some dumbass comment and made her day worse. Right. So I'm no better than anybody else. I'm constantly having to learn, okay, maybe I didn't say the right thing there, or maybe I should have kept my mouth shut there, or whatever. So we all need to be willing to look critically at ourselves, right? To say, hey, could I have done a better job? Should I have done this differently? What effect am I having on people I care about? And if we treat the people we care about like, in ways that are not productive, right? Not loving, not sympathetic, right? Not if we don't have patience with the people that are closest to us, then we know we're not being good to strangers. We know we're not being good to our enemies, right? I personally don't even consider that I have any enemies. Having lived 50 years on this planet and having experienced a lot of life, I have people have had experience with people that I do not like. I do not agree with. I do not like the way they do things. I don't like the way they vote. I don't like the way they talk. I don't like the way they harangue people about their particular beliefs. I don't like how judgmental they are. And that's fine. You don't have to like everything about everybody. But what you what I believe that you should do is always keep in the back of your mind that none of us are perfect. And the most effective way to get people to change the behaviors you don't like is to lead by example, right? To learn how to communicate effectively, which means you have to care about other people. You can't really communicate effectively with other people if you don't give a shit about who they are, about their feelings, right? Because they have their own struggles. So easy for us to look at other people like they're just robots going through the world, right? Like avatars or something like that. And we're the only people that have this emotional connection to the highs and lows and that are struggling with depression, struggling with mental health or physical ailments, right? Because it's so real and direct to us. But every single human being on this planet is struggling with the same things. Every single one of us is having to go through the same struggles. So if we focus on it, remember that, I think it will really help us to be more effective communicators, help us to set the example of how to make the world a better place. If more of us do that, the world will become a better place. We can make the world a better place. So in 2026, I challenge everyone who watches this video, and I'm going to take this challenge myself, at least once a week. Try to do it daily, but if at least once a week, go out of your way to do something nice for a stranger. Or maybe not a perfect stranger, maybe your neighbor, somebody that isn't in your immediate circle. Okay. Try to do something kind for a stranger. Okay. For no other reason than for the sake of kindness, for the sake of wanting to live in a world that's kinder. Kinder? Is that a word? Kinder. I feel like that's not a word. That has more kindness. You guys will figure it out. Make the world better. Make the world more peaceful. Make the world more loving. We could do this through our own behaviors. Because remember, we have the ability to take one thief off the planet, right? To make sure there's one less thief on the planet by not stealing from people. And we have every single one of our choices can be the same way. We can make sure there's one less murderer on the planet by not going around murdering people. We have direct control over that. Okay. So let's start there. Start with ourselves, right? And then work our way out from there. Okay, everybody. Well, I think I've pretty much covered a lot of random stuff. I don't know if I really had any particular mission here other than to just open up the panel to be consistent. Like I said, I'm sorry I started late today. It's nice to see people cruising through. I really appreciate that I'm getting support on this. Any thoughts or anything anybody wants to share? I think I pinned the link. Did I not pin the link and nobody wants to join? You guys just want to hear me talk about a bunch of random bullshit? I can't imagine that's the case, but it doesn't look like anybody's tried to join. So I'm assuming everyone's just happy enough listening to me go on and on. I should probably then wind this down. Just so for anybody who catches the end of this, wasn't at the beginning, I am starting in January, moving this to Sunday afternoons. I did not realize when I set this channel up, there were so many of my friends who have channels that are doing it Saturday afternoon. I wasn't really paying attention. So we're all kind of crossing over each other here. So I'm going to move my show to Sunday afternoons and see if that kind of frees up space for other content creators on Saturday. It'll be an open panel. That's my goal, is every Sunday to set up an open panel. I will have guests on and particular topics that I will be focusing on some Sundays, if not most Sundays. But at some point, my goal is to open up the panel for open discussion every single week, because I want to provide a platform for you guys so that you can share your ideas. And I may not agree with all your ideas. right? You may not agree with all my ideas, and I think that's good. Actually, I welcome that. I want diversity of ideas. The one thing that I am going to be a stickler about, and that I will be quote unquote enforcing, just because it's my channel, it's my responsibility, is I want people to be respectful as much as possible to each other, to not attack people, but to attack ideas. And I think we could do this. And I don't see this as being a real problem. I know the internet can be a pretty unfriendly place, just say that. But at the end of the day, I think on this channel, the people who are following because they know what I'm trying to promote here. So every Sunday, if there's anything you want to talk about, you can think ahead of time. You can always reach out to me. My contact information is in the description of the channel. If you have any questions about things I've said, or if you have any questions about fitness, again, I know I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I am on a journey to get back into great shape. I have worked as a certified personal trainer, actually. So I know a lot about fitness. I'm pretty good with nutrition. I'm not a dietitian, right? But I do know quite a bit about nutrition. So if you have any questions, if you're recovering from an injury, if you're trying to get better at your particular sport, I've got one of my clients right now is she is trying to be a professional female soccer player. And I'm really proud of her. I think that's a really lofty goal. Professional sports there's a very small number of people that can actually compete in athletics professionally, because it takes, not only do you have to have the physical ability, the strength, the coordination, hand-eye coordination, flexibility, so on and so forth, but you've got to have the skill set. Every single sport, and I've played a lot of them, takes a particular skill set. And so it's the people who want to shoot for the highest level, when at professional level, Olympic level, it's a really lofty goal. So I'm really, really proud of this young lady, and she's pretty good. So I'm not going to name names because I don't want to put her business out there. But I hope she makes it. I hope she makes it. She's very athletic, and she's putting in the work. So I'm really proud of her. But anyway, if you have any questions about fitness, if you're trying to lose weight, you know, please do reach out to me. Ask me any questions. My time is free to you. The only thing I ask is that people subscribe to the channel. I'm happy to give you all the free exercise advice, nutritional advice. Happy to do it. I have built up businesses and been successful in that. From the ground up. I've invented my own product, my own design. I have my own design patented. So if you have any questions about that, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get something started, I'm happy to give you some advice for that. I do charge consulting time normally. So, how many hours I'm going to spend helping you get your product off the ground, that's going to be more limited. But I am happy to ask some basic questions. There are some really fundamental things that anybody who wants to start a business should know about how to reduce the risks, because it's a very risky very, very risky thing to try and start up a business. So if you do have some questions, feel free to reach out to me with that. And if you have a particular topic that you'd just like a platform to be able to discuss, I'm pretty flexible. I'd be willing to open up my platform. The one thing is, if you want to talk about a political belief or a religious belief or something like this, maybe a philosophical model, you need to be aware that if I open up the platform for you to do that, and I'm happy to do that, that I'm also going to be pushing back or letting people come on and push back, or ask you questions, because I'm not here to just provide a platform for someone to be a bigot or to be a jerk, or to just preach at people. Okay, if you have ideas and you think that they're worth saying, that I want you to be aware that we're here to push back on bad ideas, right? I do not want I want to try to find ways to reduce things like bigotry, but I think that my overall principle, my general principle, and the way I live my life, treating people like I want to be treated, is really going to be the best thing I can do to try to help out. So if you want to do debates, I have friends who have smaller channels that are looking to host debates. I'm happy to set you up with one of them. There's larger platforms that I do debates on. I could put you in contact with some of those people. But again, if you haven't done debates before, they're probably not going to host you, because they just, I don't know. I don't know why they wouldn't. Frankly, if I had a large channel, I mean, I guess I don't know. That's their business. It's their brand. They know what they're doing. I guess I don't. It's not for me to judge. I would just think if it's a good topic, give people a chance to get up there and throw their hat in the ring, because I know it seems to me it would be worth it if a channel is doing that. But I do definitely know a handful of small channels that want to moderate debates. They've reached out to me personally and said, "Hey, if you know anybody who's doing debates, I'd love to host one on my channel." So if you're into something like that, I don't host debates here. I'm not interested in doing something like that. Um, I just have too many other things and not enough time, frankly. But I can get you in connection with people. And then next week, that's the first Sunday of the month. We're going to be we're doing a small series right now on failed prophecies featuring our guest Johnny B. And the next one is going to be on the suffering servant. So, and I've got actually a great thumbnail that the graphic designer who's helping me with this channel, she made. And I can't wait to show everybody that. She's doing a great job. I really appreciate the support that I've gotten. By the way, the channel should be looking a little bit more professional as time goes on, because I've got people who are far more qualified to do that kind of thing than I am. And I've got a lady who's doing the thumbnails now, and she made a great one for this next week's show. I've got another lady who does marketing, and she set me up with things like TikTok and Instagram and all that bullshit stuff I don't have time to or interest in dealing with, frankly. So the channel is looking a little bit better, and I could expect it to look a lot better as the time goes on. And again, that's due to other people's talent and willingness to participate, which a lot of that stuff was just being given to me. They would not take money. I've insisted many times to compensate these people, and they just want to support the effort. So I'm really humbled and I'm really grateful for that. I do prefer to pay people for their time, just because all of our time is valuable. But these are adults. I can't force them, obviously, to take something. So, but I am grateful. So for those of you, who are doing this, if you watch this video, you know how grateful I am to you. And I really thank you for your efforts. So the first Sunday of every month, we're doing the failed prophecy series. Other than that, I don't really have a whole structure to it, other than it's going to be an open panel for people to join as they will. And I think I'm going to shut it down. Oh, it's great to see. Looks like Scott popped in. Always good to see Scott. Speaking of debates, actually, I think Scott said that he wanted to host debates on his channel. So if there's another small content creator right there you could reach out to, I'm pretty sure his contact information is in the description of his channel. He does a pretty professional job with how he's got his setup. So I'm sure he's got his contact information available, that you could reach out to him if you want somebody to moderate a debate. So there's people out there. If you're into debates, there's people out there who will debate you or who will moderate your debate. It's kind of a thing on the internet these days, and it's a good way to get your ideas out there, to challenge, to see how good of an argument you actually have. Maybe your beliefs need to be challenged in a way that you need to rethink what you're promoting is true. So I think formal debates are healthy, but I do encourage you, if you do formal debates, stick to the topic, make a good fundamental argument, avoid logical fallacies as much as possible, and especially avoid personal attacks and ad hom, because whenever I watch debates, I see people engage in that. It's just, to me, that's the quick way to lose a debate. And you might be right. You might have the true argument, and you could lose a debate just from a bad performance like that. So, all right, everybody. Well, Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you had a fantastic holiday and all that good shit. I look forward to 2026 and look forward to engaging with all of you again. Thank you for everyone who stopped by. And I will see you guys next Sunday after Johnny does his presentation on the failed prophecy, which is going to be a suffering servant. We're going to go over. We're going to open up that panel like we do every Sunday, and you're welcome to join us. Thank you so much. Good to see everybody.